Welcome to Richard and Greg, a channel dedicated to discussion, debate and argument on a whole array of topics. Today we are told that Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister, is now out of intensive care and appears to be recovering. Also, Dr Fauci of the United States has announced today that the number of expected US deaths as a result of the coronavirus will be considerably less than anticipated. So let's go over to Greg and discuss this with him, also obtaining an update on the actual figures. Welcome to Richard and Greg. The date is Friday the 10th of April 2020 and the time is 18:37 GMT +1. We've heard today that our Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, is out of intensive care. And we've also heard, only a couple of hours ago, that Dr. Fauci of the United States has publicly declared that according to his latest model, the number of deaths in the United States anticipated as a result of the coronavirus is now more likely to be around 60,000 rather than the 100 to 200,000 that he feared. Well, we're going to ask controversially Greg, who predicted anything up to 10 million deaths in the United States as being a potential outcome. So let's ask Greg, are you simply a fearmonger peddling fear porn? Greg, good evening.
Good evening, and it's been another lovely day. No, I am somebody who has made a point of being pedantically accurate in what I said. At no stage did I predict 10 million deaths in America, nor did I predict 1.5 to 2 million deaths in Britain. I did say there was a possibility of those numbers. There is and there still is a possibility. We do not have a vaccination. We may never find a vaccination. We've been looking for years for a vaccination for the common cold. We have very little idea of how this virus functions. We don't even know if, having had the virus, you obtain immunity that is in any way lasting. Think of other diseases, some viral, such as herpes or malaria, where you can have had herpes or malaria, I understand, and I personally have malaria. Pleased to say I haven't got any of the assorted herpes viruses, though I have had chickenpox, which is one of the herpes viruses. And in some cases, that comes back on a regular basis. I have malaria, which repeats, although the last time I was in a malarial zone was in South America in the 1980s, beginning of the 80s. And I had got malaria some 10 years beforehand in Africa. I still get malaria to this day, where I will feel grotty with this virus every so often. We're now down to maybe twice a year, and it lasts for 1 or 2 days, and it's not serious. It gets less and less. It could well be the case that COVID-19 does exactly the same thing and gets worse and worse. We don't know. Therefore, I stand by my statement that America could have 10 million deaths, and so could Britain have up to 2 million. It is very unlikely it would exceed that figure. But we must remember that the Spanish flu at the end of the First World War killed more people than were killed by the First World War and had a death toll estimated at between 50 and 100 million. And the previous major pandemic was the plague, and that killed 1 in 3 of every person in London, and across Europe is estimated to have killed 40% of the population. So my predicted possibility is more than possible. Fauci, on the other hand, is using modeling. Well, we know that modeling is not a science. It is one of the dark arts and utterly dependent on what facts are put into the model. The classic example that we have all been exposed to recently has been climate change and the myth that it is anthropogenic. And we know that the models have been wildly different and most have been wildly wrong.
Okay then,
So,
Greg.
sorry, I don't buy into Fauci's certainty.
Okay, so what is the current situation and how do you see it progressing from here?
We currently have 1,674,854 reported cases. We have gone into some detail in earlier podcasts as to how the figures are really so risibly inaccurate as to be hardly worth looking at. And we also have a situation of total deaths which have now surpassed 100,000. That's actually recorded. There are many reasons to believe and to be certain that these figures are wild underestimates, but they are based on what governments wish to tell their people. In America, there are 488,900, so it'll be 500,000 within hours who have got the disease. There are 20,000 new cases today alone, 1,300 new cases of death, in as far as you can call death a case, bringing America's total to 18,000. Spain's death toll is 15,970. Italy is 18,849. France is 13,197. China is 3,336. And implausible or what? And the UK is 8,958. And we know, and in fact the government has openly stated, this figure is an underestimate. We had 980 new cases today. It is probable that tomorrow or Sunday that'll be around 1,000. It will hold at about that figure for a period of time, probably 3 weeks. And then there will be a slight fall away, but it could continue to produce 1,000 deaths and then escalate again to a much higher figure once the lockdown is removed. So I hope that clarifies it a little bit and gives people pause for thought. I am not giving certain answers. I don't even believe the fantasy figures of Fauci's modeling or anybody else's modeling. So take it seriously, plan for the worst and hope for the best.
What does seem to be happening, at least, shall we say nominally, and that is some of the hospitals that were expected to be vastly overrun and requiring many more ventilators than they had are now starting to say in certain places, actually the demand has not been as bad as they were originally forecasting. So it's clearly a sign that isolating one's population seems to be working as far as that's concerned. But do you take heart by that information or not?
I take heart by somebody who has proved the modelling is wrong. They modelled it and thought that they were going to get a much higher number. In fact, it's turned out so far to be lower. However, that was exactly what our government was endeavouring to achieve.
Yeah.
When Boris Johnson introduced the concept of lockdown of the population, it was not to reduce the number of people who got the disease. It was to reduce the number of people who got it at any one time. Mm-hmm. So his plan and that of his cabinet has worked so far admirably. Mm-hmm. Since they were working it absolutely in the dark, one can but applaud their success so far. Much of it, of course, will be based on luck, but luck is opportunity meeting preparation. And at the moment, they have managed to prevent huge numbers of cases presenting all at once, which is why we only have 73,758 cases effectively recorded. But let's face it, in the last 3 or 4 days, maybe a little less, 2 or 3, we have just crossed another milestone with over 1 million currently active cases. Only 371,858 cases are recorded as no longer cases. Presumably that includes the dead and the recovered.
I mean, as we mentioned on a previous podcast, Greg, it's not in any government's interest to declare a considerable number. As we discussed in China, the number of mobile phones that were cut off between January and March of this year was in excess of 20 million. Now, one doesn't know for a fact whether that's all deaths, but it's likely to be a large proportion. And of course, if that is the case, we're finding in the United Kingdom, the only deaths recorded for coronavirus are those in hospitals. So clearly, if you die of coronavirus at home, or you die of coronavirus or coronavirus-caused ailments in an old people's home, for example, they are not recorded. So I don't think anyone would question your assessment that these figures are grossly understated. But do you really think they could be understated to the tunes of hundreds of thousands, ignoring China for a moment?
Yes.
But would that not then show forth in the levels of bodies now waiting to be cremated or waiting for funerals or hospitals packed to the gilders if that was the case?
When you think that Italy, we saw films of the military arriving at hospitals to remove the bodies en masse in military trucks because they couldn't even store the bodies awaiting collection in the hospitals and the emergency morgues. So my answer is a categoric yes. Right. They have shown us that they can't handle the numbers of bodies. We have no reason to believe that they can manage to count them either.
Right. Well, Greg, thank you for that. Any last-minute news or comments you wish to make? And we can call this a roundup for Friday evening.
It is a roundup of possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
Possibilities that are more likely to be the bad possibilities realize if the lockdown is stopped too soon,
Mm-hmm.
or the moronic idiots who block the lockdown and gaily trot around until they get the virus, but in the meantime give it to other people, behave like that. These appalling potentials could well be recognized. They could well happen to us. There have been many other species on this planet prior to us who have been wiped out.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing says that it couldn't happen to us. However, as I've said, plan for the worst and hope for the best. And I hope that all of you listening will make sure that everyone you know is aware of how appalling this could become, so that they do everything in accord with the common sense being handed down by most governments. Because the government in a democracy was elected by the people, and we get the government we deserve. That in countries where they pay little attention to their politics and are looking purely for self-gain from the election of somebody and let the devil take the hindmost, they will be lied to by their politicians, and their politicians are more likely to make idiotic, ego-based decisions. So good luck. You have the government you deserve, because most of the people listening to this have the benefit of living in a democracy. And good luck to everybody. And I hope that the disease is curtailed quite quickly, whether from natural causes or a stroke of luck. In the meantime, we must do our best to manage it. Good night. There's a few hours of sunshine left.
Yes, and my supper is awaiting me, I've just been told. But Greg, thank you for that. I will just add that my greatest concern is that now Fauci has said that the number of deaths will be less, and some of the hospitals are saying this is not going to affect us quite as badly as we thought. There is, of course, the danger that the president or his administration will encourage people out of their solitary confinement, if you like, potentially too quickly or too early, and this whole thing could resurrect once again. Let's hope that doesn't happen. Greg, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you enjoyed that discussion. If you wish to help support this channel, we've placed various Amazon links in the description box below, all of which are self-explanatory, and any purchases from which we shall receive a small commission to help grow the channel further. Meanwhile, please do not forget to subscribe and press the bell sign so that you're notified of any future videos as and when they are published. In addition, we have 2 complimentary channels, the first Illuminati Silver and the second Trump for President 2020. And if either of these are of interest to you, then kindly go over to those likewise and subscribe. Until next time.